Hey, welcome to Rob Paints Models. In today's episode we're going to be painting Ironskullz Boyz from Shadespire. I'm going to be showing you how to paint Iron Cutter here. We're going to start with his yellow armour, then we're going to paint all of the metal areas, then all of the skin, then all of the black and leather areas. Now to start painting our yellow, we're actually going to do a pre-shade followed by a filter. So we're going to start by painting all of the yellow armour with Screamer Pink. Now Screamer Pink is roughly opposite yellow on the colour wheel, and this is going to form our shadow colour. Now we're going to use Avalon Sunset, and we're just going to spray from above and from the sides, just keeping the Screamer Pink in the very most recessed areas, essentially underneath the belly, underneath the arms, underneath the legs. Now we're going to be spraying Ushabti Bone in a zenithal highlight from above and slightly in front. And our last airbrush highlight, we're going to be using Pallid Witch Flesh, and we're just going to be hitting up the very top of the model and any areas that we want to pop, like the kneecaps, or his feet, or the top of his shoulder pads. Now we're going to be applying Lamenter's Yellow with our airbrush, and this is our filter colour. So Lamenter's Yellow, being a GW glaze, is very translucent but very highly pigmented, and it will stick to all of our flat surfaces rather than running into the recesses. Now what this will do is it will turn our Screamer Pink into a very nice orangey brown tone. So our pink no longer looks pink, it looks brown, and that's because of the way that the colours have multiplied and mixed together on top of each other. We're now going to be doing a shade. This is a recess shade, and what I'm doing here is I'm applying a very thin film of clean water over the surface I'm going to shade, and then I'm applying Druchii Violet straight from the pot, and this has already broken the surface tension, so you can see it's going straight into the recesses. It is going to darken down the yellow a little bit on the surface, but that's not a problem because of what we're going to do next. Now, a word of warning, you might end up with some chalky white areas after this has dried. If that happens, just to brush on some Lamian Medium, and those will all go away. Now we're going to take some thinned down Flash Gitz Yellow, and we're going to start glazing in some highlights. So we want to move from the shadow areas into the light. I'm going to be showing you this one shoulder pad here, but I did this over the entire model. By the time I was finished doing the whole model, the first part I'd done had already dried. So this is layer number 2. As you see, I'm just applying it to a slightly smaller area than before, and I'm going to be repeating this process for about 5 layers, just always glazing from the shadow into the light. And then when all of the Flash Gitz Yellow is done, it should look like this. Now we're going to do an edge highlight with Ushabti Bone, and I'm going to be using the edge of the brush here as it's just easier, and we're going to be applying this to all of the edges that we have painted yellow on so far. Now we're going to use Pallid Witch Flesh, and this is just painting the topmost edges of our previous edge highlights, plus wherever two corners meet and wherever a scratch intersects an edge. And once we've done all of that, I just go over and I paint everything that's going to be metal or black. To start off our rusted metal, we're going to start by dry brushing everything with Warplock bronze. We're then going to do another dry brush of Ironbreaker, just hitting up the raised surfaces more, trying to keep the Warplock bronze in the very deepest recesses. And this is our last dry brush. It's Necron Compound. We're only going to be using downstrokes on this so that it hits the topmost surfaces. I'm going to follow that up with a mixture of our Armour Wash. The recipe for that will be in the description below. Now to make everything nice and rusty, we're going to use Rhinox hide and a piece of old spruce sponge. And we're just going to dab that onto our areas where we want the rust to appear. I'm going to use several different colours here, so I'm going to add on a little bit of Naggaroth Night here, which will just darken it up and give us a bit more tonal variation. Then we use some Scrag Brown, and this is for the lighter, more recent rust. And then a little bit of Avalon Sunset. Now I'm going to use some Ironbreaker on a sponge, and rather than dabbing this on, I'm going to create swiping motions from the rust to the cutting edge of the weapon to make it look as if they've been polishing or sharpening up their weapons. I'm going to take some Necron Compound on a dry brush, and we're just going to lightly apply that to the cutting edges of the weapons. And lastly, take some VMA Chrome and just create some little streaks to make it look more like they've been sharpening their weapons. And we're also going to use this to do a little bit of edge highlighting on some of the edges, particularly the tops of the scratches. And the final touch is take some Abaddon Black and just paint it into the scratched areas. For the skin, we're going to base coat all of the skin with Castellan Green. We want a nice opaque base coat of this, so it's going to take 2 to 3 coats, thinly applied. Now, this whole process is pretty much the same. We're going to be taking a little bit of Cadian Flesh Tone and adding it into our Castellan Green, and then we're going to be painting up some thin layers on the topmost surfaces of the skin. Now we're going to keep doing this until we eventually reach pure Cadian Flesh Tone, and we're going to be focusing that particular tone, the pure Cadian Flesh Tone, on the tips of the ears, the nose, the lips around the mouth, the tops of any muscles that they're like flexing and really tight, just to make it look like that there's other matter like muscles and blood vessels underneath the skin, where it's all been drawn tight and you can see through the skin to the blood vessels underneath. Once you've got how you want it to look, just take some Athonian Camoshade and cover all of the skin with this. Make sure it doesn't pull too much on places like the top of the head or the back of their neck. But once this is dry, this will create a nice shade, and it will also unify all of the different layers, and you won't be able to see the transitions anymore. So there you go, that's what it looks like when it's dry. Now we're going to be painting all of the leather and the cloth areas black, so we're going to be base coating those with Dark Reaper. This is a layer paint, so it takes about 2 to 3 coats to cover over black. If there are any metal parts that you want to be black, then just use this to create the highlights. I use this in a kind of glaze consistency, just pulling again from the shadows into the light. Now we're going to use some rust grey, and we're just going to paint some edge highlights on the metal areas and the leather areas that we want to be black. You can also use this to create little scratches as well on the metal and the leather. Now for the legs, we're actually going to be glazing the rust grey into the light areas, so moving from the hips to the knees. And then we're going to take some Abaddon black and we're going to glaze that from the light into the shadows, so from the knees into the hips essentially. We're also going to take that Abaddon black glaze and we're going to apply it to the middles of the belts and use it to shade the metal areas. And the last step is to use Nuln Oil, and this is mostly to create a delineation between the different sections. You don't want this to pull too much on the highlighted areas. You just want this to run into the different folds on the legs and on the leather areas. An optional step here, you can use Ulthuan Grey to create an extra little highlight on the top surfaces of all of the leather and the metal. You can create little nicks and tears along the leather as well with this if you want. Now to paint the eyes, use some thinned down Evilson Scarlet and a small brush. You don't want this to be so thin that it floods the eye socket though. Use the side of the tip of your brush and just gently touch the side of the tip of your brush against the eye and then draw it towards you. Paint all of the teeth and the insides of the mouth with Rhinox hide. Now we're going to use Rakarth Flesh and we're going to paint each of the teeth so that there's a little line of Rhinox hide along the gum and between each of the teeth. Finally use some Pallid Witch Flesh and just paint the tips of the teeth where the tooth is the sharpest, and we're going to highlight it with that. Now take some VMA Chrome or Stormhost Silver and paint in the remaining metalwork such as any buckle model or any of the loops, hooks and fasteners. And you can paint it with that. And you can apply a little Nuln Oil afterwards if you want, but I didn't bother. Some watered down Scrag Brown makes for a great little rust effect. Just let this run into the rivet on the yellow armour. You can apply it onto the chainmail pretty much at random. Just create little streaks where you pull the brush down from, say, a rivet on the armour, and it creates nice little rust streaks. This will dry a lot more transparent than it looks when you put it on at first, so just let each layer dry before you decide if you want to add more. I'm going to be base coating the base with Mournfang Brown. Now as the feet are stuck to the base for this, you can't take them off, they're moulded on there. Just be very careful when you're painting around the feet. I advise painting around them first, just using the tip of your brush to outline them, and then you can fill in the rest, no problem. It's Orcs and it's going to be a very dusty, deserty base, so it doesn't matter if you get a little bit of paint on them. Now we're going to be doing some wet blending here, so take some Mournfang Brown, add some water to it so it doesn't dry out. You might need to add some slow dry paint retarder to be able to do this properly, but I didn't need to for these bases. And just paint the back of the base with the Mournfang Brown. Then take some Scrag Brown, do the same thing, and paint this into the middle of the base so that it's mixing with the Mournfang Brown you just painted on the back. And that should create a nice little transition between those two colours. Finally, we take some Fire Dragon Bright, and while the paint is still wet, paint this on the front of the base and mixing it in with the Scrag Brown that we've just painted. Once that's dry, take some Reichland Flesh Shade and paint it all over the base. We're going to be doing a similar wet blending thing with the washes here, so all of these steps need to be done before each of them is the previous steps dried and while the paint is nice and wet. Take some Agrax Earth Shade and paint that into the back. Again, just mixing the Reichland Flesh Shade into the Agrax Earth Shade on the back of the base there. And once it's dry, it should look like this. Now take some Kindle Flame and dry brush that from the front of the base to the back of the base, so we're only catching the frontmost edges of the rocks and stones, and it will look like the sun is in front of our model. Once you've painted all that, you can paint the branches and the skulls with whatever recipe you want to use. I used the recipe from the previous video for how to paint the skulls on the Garrux Reaper's bases. That's it, that's everything you need to know in order to be able to paint Iron Cutter. I painted all of the Orruks in this colour scheme, and the leader, this guy, he's got a cloak. That fur on his cloak is just Mournfang Brown with a Kindle Flame dry brush and then an Agrax Earthshade wash. Really easy, and I'll have a separate video going up on how to wet blend cloaks, which will be starring this guy's cloak. That's going to be a bonus video. Please like, share and subscribe if you liked this video. Last time I looked, I had almost 3,000 subscribers, so welcome to all you new subscribers. Thank you for subscribing. I'm hoping to get onto a weekly schedule. The New Year's kind of messed everything up a little bit, but next week I will be painting the Skeletons from Shadespire, and I'll be showing you how to paint all of the bone, the metal, and a glowing eyes effect that you can see on the box art. I'll be painting that as well on those guys. You can follow me on all of the social medias. I have a Facebook, a Twitter, and an Instagram that I post to pretty regularly. You can see work in progress of all the stuff that I'm doing. So you'll know first if I'm running late on a video, because I'll talk about it on there. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching my videos. You're all amazing people. I hope you paint all your models and you have a great 2018. Bye!